Welcome to the Practice Podcast, a show created by lawyers to help lawyers in life and business without all the complicated lawyer language. Let's welcome Bast Amron founders and your hosts, Jeff Bast and Brett Amron.
For the practice. Hi, Brett.
Yeah. How you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing well. We are not together in the studio.
That's
our
why
guest
you're doing
is
well?
afar.
It's fine.
That's one of the reasons, yes. Jeff just coming back from his daughter's college graduation. Congratulations to you.
And same to you,
And
Danny.
to your daughter, yes. Thank you. And to Danny and Hannah. And yep, time flies.
It sure does. Crazy.
Yeah. So I today am going to ask you a question. I've been sort of going between two, and to be honest, I'm not sure I have an answer to one of them. So maybe I'll ask the one I probably do have an answer to in case you reciprocate.
I'm going to reciprocate.
All right. What books are you reading or planning to read this summer?
Okay. I don't usually read fiction. I'm a nonfiction reader, but I'm reading a fiction book right now called Black Sun that was recommended to me by my daughter. She loved it. And I have this book on deck called Blue Mind, the surprising science that shows how being near, in, on, or underwater can make you happier, healthier, more connected, and better at what you do. So this is on deck.
So everyone should jump in the water.
That's, I'm a believer. I'm reading something that, I already believe in, so maybe I shouldn't read it. I also just bought a book. I went to a used bookstore and coffee shop recently, and Seneca on the shortness of life. Life is long if you know how to use it. So just a very short one. I'll probably
I like it.
One into. What about you? I know you're a big reader.
I have a couple that I'm working through. The new Malcolm Gladwell book, which I think I've mentioned on a previous episode, working through that our wonderful producer extraordinaire purchased for me and gave me as a gift.
Nice.
I am working through another book, which is a compilation of essays by a New York Times columnist called Side Country. And it's about people who go out and do extraordinary things in nature and have had things happen to them, some good, some bad. For example, there was a group of people that were skiing in backcountry, a couple decades ago out in Washington State. Avalanche killed a few of them, and the story of the whole thing. They're pretty incredible.
Cool.
Essays. So I'm working through that. And then I thought, like you, I mostly read nonfiction, but I thought about maybe picking up fiction this summer. And I have a book that I've had for a while. I actually saw these guys speak here in Miami when the book came out, and I never actually opened the book to read it. So I pulled it out. It's called The President is Missing. It's by James Patterson and Bill Clinton.
Oh, cool. That sounds great.
Yeah, so it's an interesting story that I think that's kind of right up my alley.
I like it.
That kind of stuff. So anyway.
It looked like our guest was jotting notes down too, so I'm curious to hear what he has to say. But first, let me introduce Morris Tabush. Morris is a tech enthusiast. He's an entrepreneur, he's a community activist, and he's the founder of Tabush Group, a leading provider of virtual workspaces, private clouds, and managed IT services, primarily to mid-sized professional firms. Under his leadership, Tabush Group developed BoxTop, which is a cloud desktop platform that enables firms to securely and efficiently operate their IT infrastructure in the cloud. He also co-founded Bill for Time in 2007, which is one of the first cloud-based time and billing systems for law firms. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Information Systems from Yeshiva University. He's an active member of Entrepreneurs Organization in New York City, and he serves as a faculty member for the American Bar Association Tech Show, the Association of Legal Administrators, and the Managing Partner Forum. Morris is also committed to community service. As an avid cyclist, he has completed 7 half marathons, so I'm counting that as 3.5 marathons, and is a founding rider of Bike for Chai, a fundraising cycling event that supports children with serious illnesses. Welcome, Morris. We're happy to have you there.
Thank you, Jeff. Good to be here, Brett. Great to see you guys
welcome.
again.
You want to share the book you're reading?
I actually did jot down a few books you guys were mentioning. I have this. Well, I guess it's better than a buying addiction. I don't buy every book I hear about, but I add them to a list I have on Amazon. I eventually buy them. So right now, I'm almost finished with From Beirut to Jerusalem, which was written by Thomas Friedman back in 1989. He lived in Beirut in the early 80s during the Civil War there. Then he lived in Jerusalem as the Israeli correspondent for the Times, and then he was sent back to Washington. So most of what he wrote is from 35 years ago or more, but there's actually a very interesting preface that he wrote last year. So it's interesting to see how some things have changed and some things have not.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wonder how different things are, yet how similar things were made, given all the passing time.
Exactly.
So tell us, how did you, Morris? I mean, Jeff and I sat with you, we've spoken to you, we've known you for a few years now. And so I think generally know the story, but our listeners don't. Give us a start. You don't have to start when you were in diapers, but give us a start. How you got into owning your own business. Tell us how you started and your journey to kind of get where you are, and we'll kind of dive in and ask questions that go along the way.
So I grew up in Monmouth County, New Jersey, which is about an hour and a half to 2 hour drive from New York City. I was always into technology from when I'm a little kid. And when I was in high school, I was the guy, my friends were outside playing basketball. On Sundays, I was inside figuring out what happens if I press this button on the computer. And of course, computers in the early 90s were way different than they are today. I started getting phone calls from people around the neighborhood saying, hey, we want to buy a computer for our house, or we have a computer and we want to get into this thing called America Online. This is back in the days when AOL mailed out floppy disks and, with every magazine. But, people were scared. They bought a computer, but they're scared to take it out of the box. What do we do? How do we hook it up? So I became that guy around town, riding his bike to people's houses, setting up their computers, teaching them how to use them, getting them.
And how old were you?
It started when I was about 14 or 15. I got my first phone call in 9th grade. It was from my best friend's aunt, who, again, heard about me and called. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Maybe I can make some money at it. I hung up flyers all around town. I actually still have one of those flyers over, in my office, but I was hanging up flyers, and so I did that throughout high school. I was also getting called to the office in school about 3 times a week to help them with their computer. There was one computer in school. When I was in college a few years later, went to school in New York City, I kept getting phone calls, and now it was from people saying, hey, you came to my house a few years ago. Well, can you come to my office in New York? We want to get our computers networked, or we want to get our own email domain and not share one AOL address for the office. So again, I was already in the city. I was doing a little bit of that, cleaning viruses, random freelance IT work for businesses. Senior year, my dad comes to me and says, you're graduating in a few months. What are you going to do? Like, I didn't think of that. And, my dad has always my dad has always had his own business. My grandfather had his own business. So that was kind of in my mind, like, all right, I got to have my own business. I said, I really like this IT stuff. I think I'm somewhat okay at it. Let me give it a shot. I had a couple of good internships also throughout the years that kind of helped teach me what I do and don't like doing. So I graduated school, hired one guy to start who happened to be in one of my college classes and heard I was starting a business. Took a small office, maybe 700 square feet somewhere in Manhattan, because at the time, everybody said, you want to do business, you got to be in the city. All the businesses in the city. And literally started in June of 2001. Had a few small clients calling us from time to time, keeping us busy. But other than that, I hit the streets of Manhattan, had one of those little granny wagons to walk around with, and we were handing out promotional materials, golf balls with our logo, little memo cubes, and printed out letters saying, hey, we're a company, we do this, we help businesses with technology. If you need computers, internet, viruses, servers, whatever it was, this is what we do. And we literally, I remember walking up and down the streets. At the time, you can walk into any office building in Manhattan. There was no security to check your ID and, make sure you had an appointment. We went door to door in the beginning. And little by little, phone calls, phones started to ring. People needed help with things. It was very rough the first few years. I'm not going to lie. I kind of remember watching, every week when I went to run payroll, watching the bank account go a little lower, a little lower, a little higher, a little lower, a little lower, a little higher, a little lower. But it was going lower more than it was going higher. And then all of a sudden, about a year into it, I was like, wait a minute, we had more money now than we had a week ago. What's going on? And my accountant looked at it, he goes, well, you're actually making money now. Now, I wasn't paying myself. I was paying myself, like, I think $500 a week just because my accountant said, do that so you don't, raise any red flags. But, like any business, the more you do it, the better you get at it. You figure things out. And also over time, obviously, we've changed a lot what we do and who do it for. But 25 years later, still doing it.
Amazing. I love that. I love the walking the streets and building a business and the idea that you could just walk into a building and just knock on a door. I'm curious, though, how did you learn to pay? You said you took $500 a week, a basic thing, but how did you learn to pay yourself? Because that's something Brett and I had to be taught. We were, tending to leave a lot of money, and you had to learn to start paying yourself. Somebody had to teach you that.
So what happened was in the summer of 2000, that's when I had a summer internship somewhere. I wasn't really enjoying it. I was doing software development work for a company, and I just learned that I really didn't like coding, and my freelance work was picking up. So kind of asked the company that I was working for, hey, would you mind if I kind of cut this internship short by 6 weeks? We parted on very good terms. And, my family's accountant was, he's been doing my dad's business since before I was born. So he was kind of advising me on some things. He said, said, listen, you're starting to bring in some real money. Now, I don't know, maybe real money was $600 a week. I don't remember what it was. He goes, form a company, just form a corporation. I'm like, ooh, that sounds cool. I didn't know what it meant. So one of my friend's dad was a lawyer. He helped me with the corporate documents, the formation. And fast forward a few months, now I'm actually taking an office and hiring an employee who I have to put on payroll. And that's when the accountant said, listen, put yourself on payroll. I was, we were an S corp from the very beginning. Said, put yourself on for something. Just put on $500 a week. It'll look better to the IRS. So I just trusted him.
So obviously, coding, computers, technology, that's the substance of it, like us with the practice of law. But actually forming and running a business, knowing to do an S corp election, knowing to do payroll and things like pay yourself, things like that. Was that something that you learned from watching your dad or speaking to your father? Or did you just sort of learn it along the way? Like, tell us, how did you pick up those skills, at least early on?
I like to say that I learned more running my own business in 1 month than I did in 4 years of business school. I took two semesters of accounting and finance and management, and I took all the prerequisites. I couldn't tell you what an asset or a liability was for anything. Once it was my business and my hard-earned money sitting in an account, I knew right what everything was. But so listen, my dad built the business up over the last 50 years or so, but my dad's a retailer. His business was ladies' wear clothing stores. And while he's very good with numbers and great with math, he said to me when I decided to enter the business, he said, listen, I don't know anything about technology. I really can't help you. Is there even a real business in what you want to do? Like, people made money doing computer service. I said, I don't know. But, at the time I was 21 years old. I had no living expenses or very little expenses. So I said, I'm going to give it a shot. Even the accountant, who's still my accountant to this day, he told me kind of what I have to do. So you have to hire a payroll. Actually, I didn't hire a payroll company in the beginning. I did payroll myself. But you have to get workers' comp insurance. You have to do this. You have to use QuickBooks. He told me the basics, and he was definitely holding my hand a little bit, maybe, or a lot in the beginning. But honestly, I went into this thing with no business plan, no coach, no methodology, no documentation. I read the E-Myth by Michael Gerber. So somebody bought me that book when I was in college. E-Myth Revisited. Somebody bought me that book when I was in college, and that was a great first book. But other than that, I just went into it honestly with no preparation, no training, no formal business education. It's a miracle that I survived this.
I don't think it's a miracle. I think it's a tribute to you, obviously, and your work ethic and all of that. In some ways, the barriers to entry, right, have gotten easier, less barriers to entry in terms of forming your own business with technology. You can do it from your home. But I feel like the barriers to entry there are some barriers to entry which were less, right, less present back when you formed a company, for example, like you said, walking from building to building and just going in and sitting down and talking to people and selling yourself and selling your business. So obviously you're in the technology space, but what have you seen in terms of the businesses and the clients that you have, that in terms of the barriers to entry, in terms of starting a business and running a business today versus when you did it?
So just relating to starting and running a business, nothing to do with technology. I'll say this: today, there's for sure so many more resources available to either existing new business owners or wannabe entrepreneurs, whether it's groups like EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, or coaching programs, or outsourcing providers like, for example, PEOs that, we all know PEOs handle everything HR and taxes and benefits under the sun. I don't think those existed 25 years ago. So there's a lot more resources that can help business owners with that. Of course, all these things cost money. I don't know if there's any more or less barriers to entry. I think it's about being in the right place at the right time. I'm not sure about the practice of law, how much that's changed in 25 years. I know it has. Technology, that business has changed tremendously. What people need today is completely different than what they needed 25 years ago. Yeah. And so I think that's a huge difference. Again, with technology, you don't have to go to law school and pass the bar like you do in law. There's no official, yes, of course, there's certifications up the wazoo, but they're all, there's no requirements. There's no bar association for technology.
I think that one of the key differences, there are so many more, like you said, so many more resources, but also so many more channels for communication. You can Before you were literally knocking on doors. Now you can send email blasts, text, LinkedIn, Facebook. There's all these channels. But with those channels, the flow is so massive that it's hard to stand out among the competition. That it's like too much. There's too many channels and too much communication through those channels that it's hard we tend to suppress it all. And so it's hard to have, there's channels to communicate, but it's harder to have your voice heard, I think.
Well, you know what they say? You're definitely right about it. They say talk is cheap. Well, talk used to be cheap. Now talk is free. You can send emails, you can make phone calls, you can do LinkedIn blasts. You're not even doing them. You have AI bots doing them for you. And you're right. It gets so cluttered. There's so much noise. How do you stand out in something like that?
Yeah.
Well, I know with the practice of law, technology has substantially helped, right? Small or solo practitioners, small firms, solo practitioners sort of up their game, if you will, by the use of technology. It's become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, as I'm sure you've seen. And so the barrier there is a little bit easier than it was even 16 or 18 years ago when we started our own firms. But I feel like you're right. There's this, because of the technology and the number of different avenues to gain access to people, that how do you stand out? Because there's so many people and there's so many different avenues.
Right. And that's true for any business.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, Morris, what do you think? Because now, on this topic of the ease of starting a business now, I remember actually when I started my firm, I was like, I need a laptop and internet connection. I didn't need a phone really, even anything. So now people can start a business. They do it at Starbucks. What's wrong with that? What's wrong from the tech side? What is wrong with these entrepreneurs who just start a business with a laptop and they sit in Starbucks or some other public place and do their work?
So I heard this a few years ago from someone. We were having a discussion about cloud versus on-premise. And on-premise is the nice way to say servers and VPNs and the way that technology was 20 years ago. For the most part, when you would build a network 20 years ago for a business, you would go out, you'd hire a consultant or a service provider or professional. They know what they're doing, and they would build, most of the time, they know what they're doing, and they would do it right for you. So that they would come in, for example, say, okay, you need these servers, you need this kind of backup system, you need this kind of firewall, you need this security, this VPN, this is what you need. And again, a little bit of back and forth and negotiating, but okay, you go with it. You couldn't, the average business owner couldn't go out and do that themselves. Today with cloud, very easy to go online and sign up for something yourself, whether it be a Clio or a NetDocuments or Office 365. They make it, maybe not NetDocs so much, but these companies make it really, really easy. They want to make that onboarding experience as easy and as frictionless as possible. The problem is, because they want to make it as easy as possible, they also sort of only tell you what you must do. You must pick a username, a password, put a credit card in, and start using it. They don't tell you that for example, you have to set up information governance policies, or you have to set up access policies and multi-factor authentication. That's a little bit more complicated, and complexity kills deals. So when people do it themselves, they very often learn the hard way what they missed. The most common example is Office 365, which is a great platform. Almost every one of our clients uses it. I'm guessing most of your listeners use it too. It has a lot of security features in it, but they're all turned off by default. So most people set it up, don't enable two-factor authentication, and that's how business email compromise happens. Or I'm going to use you as the example, Jeff. You set it up for the firm, so the first two employees are you and Brett. You turn it on for you two guys. But then you add 6 more employees and you forget to set up on a few of them, and one of them falls victim. So there are ways to enforce policies and to do things the right way. It's kind of like me. I can go on LegalZoom and draft some documents, and I'll learn the hard way when they're held up in court or something. Whereas if I hired a firm like yours, like, okay, you've done this a few hundred times already, you know the right way.
Yeah. You might get away with it until you don't.
Exactly.
Like you said, you learn the mistake the hard way.
Well, you raise a great point, and I know this is within your wheelhouse and your space, which is you make a mistake today with technology, whether it be email or compromising your systems, or somebody hits, a phishing email or something like that. It can be catastrophic. Whereas 20 years ago, it could be more contained. It wasn't as bad, right? Today, the spiraling effect of a phishing email or something that's posted that shouldn't have been posted or something, it's out of control, right? So how do you sort of talk to clients about, give us a little insight into that, about how best to sort of start laying out the foundation for, good governance in these areas?
Oh, wow, this is an interesting one.
Yeah.
So I'll say this.
I don't want to give away trade secrets because everybody didn't hire Morris.
Right.
But just generally,
So I'll say
like, where do you start?
Yeah. We don't sell security. We help clients buy security. We've had time. So we have clients that have been with us 2 decades or more, which is amazing. I'm so thankful to have them for so long. When there is over the last, let's say 5 or so years, 5 to 8 years is when you really have to start ramping up your cybersecurity measures. I want to say from 2001 to 2016 or 17, for the most part, you had the same stuff. You had the same firewall, the same Norton antivirus, just the newer version. It was around that inflection point, 16 or 17, maybe a little before, when things started to the world started to change. And what worked for you in the past was no longer going to work for you. Now, we had these discussions with all of our clients. We said, we've got to start switching things out or adding pieces in. And of course, adding pieces in costs money. And every business owner says, the more they do, technology is an overhead expense. It's not something they can make money back on. So we had the discussions with all of them, and most of them were pretty trustworthy of what we were doing, and they realized the importance. But some were a little resistant. And again, I understand they're business owners. They don't want to spend money. They don't understand what a lot of this stuff is. But as best as we tried to explain to them why things are different, why they need it, sometimes they wouldn't do something until it's too late, until they got hit. But what I actually found worked the best was telling this to my clients. Take, for example, I'm just going to pick something, SOC services, Security Operations Center. So having a discussion with a client, they kept resisting. Why we don't need it. We don't need it. Why do we need it? Why do we need it now? Why do we need it before? If we need it, you should include it. They tried to give me every excuse under the book. And I finally said to them, I'm not going to use their name. I said, I'm going to call them Brett. They said, Brett, tell you what? This is a $2,000 a month service. Assuming it was pure profit from you, which it's not, I'm not getting rich off of $24,000 a year. After I split it with my partner, pay the government their share of it and everything, I'm not getting rich. I'm not sending my kids to college from this. You know what I would get rich off of? If you get hit with a cyber attack, that's a 6-figure project for us, doing incident response and recovery. The average one that we do, we don't do a lot of them, but when we do, it's between $150,000 and $300,000. So let's take this off the table. Let's end this discussion. And if and when you get hit, that's when I will get rich. He signed the proposal later that afternoon. Unfortunately, he has not gotten it.
That's a good way to put it. And by the way, I think you undersold the risk there, because that assumption is that the hit didn't affect one of his customers, who then hires Brett, the actual Brett, to sue for the damages caused by the breach.
Yeah.
So
I mean, listen, there's a ton of cybersecurity providers out there. We're not a dedicated cyber provider. We don't lead with cyber. We lead with managed services and consulting and assessment work. There's a ton of cyber providers out there, and they all use the same scare tactics to sell. And I'm sure it works for them. It's not who we are.
Right. Okay. All right. Cool. I like it. So who needs to hire you? Who should hire you? Who should be calling you right now?
So our sweet spot are working with law firms between 25 and 100 employees who have some IT pain. Very simple. We do work with non-law firms a little bit. We also work with some firms smaller than 25 and some that are bigger than 100. And that's okay. It's not so much about the size. It's more about what's their culture like and what's their need. If there's no need, if they call us, hey, we're a 65-person law firm and everything is great, but we're looking to save a little money, more than likely I can't save you money. If everything is great, we're not the cheapest out there. We don't try to be. And the last thing I want to do is save you a couple of dollars on your IT expenses. And the minute something goes wrong, and in the world of IT, things go wrong. That's why guys like me have jobs. Everybody's going to turn to you, see, why didn't we switch to them? The old company was much better. But that's our sweet spot, is that 25 to 100 person law firm that IT is being brought up at partner meeting. And then we look at it from there. We can't always help them, but what we can always do is identify why they have pain. And if we can't help them, we could generally point them in the right direction of people who can.
Gotcha.
So what's the next big issue, right? I mean, or big thing that law firms or professional services firms are going to look at and need, right? You talked about years ago, there was really no major cyber threat. It's kind of it happened, and now they've kind of stacked on protocols and technology and things like that to help with cyber. But obviously everyone's talking about AI and integration of AI and all that, but what are you seeing is like what's next for law firms and professional services firms that we're going to have to deal with?
So besides from AI, which is definitely big, I gave a workshop about it 2 weeks ago. I think you guys were at that workshop, and I continue to talk about it a lot. Besides from AI, there's so much, what we see at firms, there's so much untapped potential in their systems that they're just not taking advantage of. The technology can do amazing, amazing things. It's much more than a browser and email and copying and pasting. As well, because more and more systems are moving or have moved to the cloud, most of these systems have what's called APIs, which is almost like a gateway to talk to other software. So when we show firms either, hey, your document management and your practice management, they can talk to each other. They're not, but they can. Just put a couple hours of effort into it. Or data reporting. So we've been doing this ourselves. We actually built our own data warehouse, which collects data from 3 different software systems that we use to run our own business and gives us reports that each of the systems on their own could never deliver. Like we took processes that were taking us, this one was 3 hours a month in Excel. This one was 4 hours a month. This one was combined 16 different documents together and spent 5 hours to get what we want. We automated all of that. And not only did we do that, but once we saw, wait a minute, we could report on this. Hey, could we report on 6 other things also and show it 2 different ways? Of course we can. So, everybody's collecting so much data now in all their systems, and there's so much you can do with that data as well. Most firms that we work with, whatever practice management system they're using or time billing system they're using, most of them are using about 15 to 20% of the features. Not to say you should be using 100, but just look at what else it can do. Read the release notes of the last 3 versions that came out and you're already running that new version. Read what's been released. And there's probably something like, oh, wow, we can get rid of this Word document or this Excel spreadsheet or these notebooks or binders of information and automate this stuff. Sometimes they can get rid of people.
Amazing.
Understanding your tech stack and really getting the most out of it effectively.
Yeah. Too many people get so stuck in, we all do. I'm guilty of this. I get stuck in my ways. I've done it this way for the last 10 years. It's always worked. Why change? Well, because this new way could work so much better. Save me 2 hours a week.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm surprised that the number you gave, 15%, the point is we're utilizing a very small fraction of the tech capabilities that we already have. Yeah, I believe that.
And I'm part of that. Maybe we're at 20%, 25% at best.
Right. But certainly not all of it. Amazing stuff. Before we wrap up, we want to briefly tell us about Bike for High.
Oh, Bike for High. So now I'm excited. So I'll tell you the quick story. In 2010, a few guys that I used to cycle with approached me and said, hey, we're putting together a 2-day charity ride for an organization called High Lifeline. Want to join us? Now, I knew of High Lifeline. They're an organization that helps kids with severe illnesses, cancer, and other ones, as well as their families. And they do real miracles for these people. But I only knew about them. I said, hey, 2-day bike ride? Sure, why not? So this was the summer of 2010, 38 guys did a ride, 2 days, about 180 miles. We finished the ride at the camp for these kids, which is in Glen Spey, New York, right near Port Jervis. So we were 38 guys surrounded by 120 kids. That's how many the camp holds at a time, in wheelchairs and on all sorts of machines and dancing and singing. It was amazing. And that year, us 38 people raised $250,000. Next year got a little bigger, then a little bigger, then a little bigger. And for the last about 6 years now, or 5 years, Bike for High has been approximately 520 riders. And it raised, last year we were at $13 million. Of all the charity bike rides throughout the world, it is by far and away the highest per rider fundraiser. Wow. It's also an absolutely awesome experience. They do put on a first-class event all the way. What else can I say? No, it's like summer camp. I'd say 60 to 70% of the riders return every year. So for me, it's like summer camp. It's like 3 days away and seeing guys that I haven't seen in a year. We hang out, we schmooze, and it's a beautiful, beautiful ride, and it's for a great cause.
That's amazing.
Excellent. Thank you.
This will be my 16th year riding.
Thank you for doing the good work. Appreciate it. And it's good that it feels good too. Well, I enjoyed this, Morris. And if you're listening to this and you enjoyed it, tell us. The best way to tell us? Give us a 5-star review and subscribe to the show and leave some comments. We'd love to hear your comments. We will see you next time. Brett, thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Morris. Thanks, Nelson.
Thank you guys for having me on. It was great doing this.
That was fun. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
For more information on this show and other resources, visit fastamron.com and connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram @fastamron.